Ferrari have a major obstacle to overcome at the beginning of the 2025 season. That is what I believe has been unraveled thanks to a very interesting trail of breadcrumbs that the team and their customer teams had to endure over the opening Grand Prix weekend of this season. Now, what am I exactly talking about? Well, if you listen to Charles Leclerc's post-qualifying interview, he gave this very interesting insight to the performance loss that the team suffered going from Friday to Saturday. Now, that's quite an interesting statement he made. Now, I believe that the team essentially have a gearbox issue, and that is the whole reason behind them having to raise the ride height on the SF-25. Now, I also have other pieces of evidence that I believe fully support my claim on this, and here is those. So number one, Hamilton in the race also suffered a gear sync issue as well, which was radioed over the broadcast. And then secondly, there is a paper trail from their customer teams that have had issues with the gearbox for Ollie Bearman in qualifying, which led to him not having even done a single lap for that session, as well as the gearbox issues encountered on the final day of pre-season testing with Lewis Hamilton in the afternoon, which brought an end to his running. And I think we have now enough evidence that can really start to form this picture of where I've got to my conclusion on. And that is, of course, the fact that they have this issue where when they have the car too low towards the floor of the racetracks that they go at, they're, of course, striking the ground. And this is putting too much stress onto the gearbox as a result. And I think everything really does point to that, because of course, if that is the issue you're suffering and you've seen that in testing, and then you come to the first race and then you encounter that again in Friday practice, well, of course, the only option you have available to you to make sure you can continue the weekend really without having a gearbox failure in the race would be to raise the ride height of your SF-25 for Hamilton and Leclerc. That's what they did, essentially. We know that really for a fact. It was said by Leclerc that they actually raised the ride height of the SF-25 of both him and Hamilton's. And I think that would be really the only reason you would do so. There is no other reason from which a team would want to raise the ride height, of course, unless you're encountering porpoising again. But that is a phenomenon well and truly gone from the sport now, and that's not an issue and it's never spoken about. So we can kind of cross that as a reason behind why they would raise the ride height of the cars. So of course, that only leaves you with really one conclusion, which is what I've come to. And as we saw in qualifying and how it played out in the race, the performance of the SF-25 suffered greatly. And there is also a lot of telemetry from, I believe, FP1 or FP2 up against that of Leclerc's final Q3 lap, which showcased Leclerc was slower in the final four corners of the circuit in qualifying compared to free practice 2. Now that is crazy to actually speak about. If you think about it, when you go from practice to qualifying, you should get quicker in all of the corners because you're lowering the fuel load to the smallest amount possible. So the overnight change of raising the ride height of the car to limit the plank wear and the issue onto the gearbox killed the downforce and balance of the car. For example, they lost 8 kilometers an hour and almost 1 G into turn 11. They had to lift more in turn 12, and they also lost 2 kilometers an hour and also half a G load in turn 13. So that is a huge amount of performance loss in 4 corners. But yeah, it's a real interesting theory that I have. Let me know your thoughts on it. I would love to know what you think of this theory of mine, and do you believe that that could be the reason behind the loss in performance as well as the explanation as to why they had to raise the ride height. Now, of course, then this leads us to the big question for Ferrari as well as for the fans of the team. Well, how can they go about rectifying this issue? Can they create and design a new gearbox, for one example, in season? And if they do have to do that, how much of an undertaking in terms of resources would that be, and just the time constraint on it? Because if it was the case, then they have to design a whole new gearbox. That is basically a season write-off, because it's going to take so many months to design and to test in-house before bringing it onto the actual race car for the actual Formula One Grand Prix weekends. And essentially the title will be out of your capabilities as a result of that. So just throw the season away at that point and completely put all your resources behind 2026 at that point. That is what I would do. And of course, if that isn't the case and they cannot do that, well, what other things can they kind of change and improve upon within the overall makeup of the SF-25 to alleviate the issue without having to raise the ride height of their cars? Well, I think one such potential example of that would be the suspension and the setup from how they run the cars mechanically. And I think this could be from softening the suspension settings on their cars to make the ride through all of the bumps that are naturally embedded into a circuit, as well as on the curbs themselves. That would be a way from which you could make changes to try to help alleviate that without having to raise the ride height. So there are a few things that the team can do currently, I believe, with the SF-25, but whether that actually rectifies the issue, only time will tell. And the next kind of real test of the car and my theory behind what has happened this weekend is, of course, this upcoming week when we go down to China in Shanghai. And if it's a dry race, I think we're going to get a better and clearer understanding of whether that is an issue or whether it was just something that happened with regards to the Melbourne track, and it is going to be unspecified to us but known internally. Because I think if we see a situation that is very similar to that of Melbourne play out across China and then say Japan the following week, where performance looks good on a Friday, then the drop-off that happened in Melbourne occurs once again on Saturday and then into Sunday, I think we can then see a big trend and we have a big sample size then to really come to a definitive conclusion about what the major issue is. So yeah, it's going to be a very interesting 2 weeks over the next couple of Grand Prix weekends that we have. And I think we will see then a true clear picture of not only the limitations of the SF-25, but also the performance that they would currently have with how they have to run the package that they currently have at their disposal. So it's going to be a very, very interesting couple of weeks and a very important couple of weeks for the teams and drivers alike to hopefully, for their sake, get on top of this issue if it is the issue that they have. Anyway guys, I will wrap this video up here. Hope you've all enjoyed it. If you have, do leave a like on the video and share it across all social media as it helps me out greatly. Alright everyone, I'll catch you all later with some more Formula One videos. See you soon.